Hello, and welcome to another episode of eDiscovery Chicks, the podcast about all things eDiscovery and legal tech, hosted by two gals who are thrilled to welcome back one of our industry's greatest today. Anyways, we are your hosts. Oh, and we're not talking about ourselves. We are your hosts,
Oh,
though,
God.
and that's Bree.
And that's Angie. No, we are by far not talking about ourselves. Um, so today we're actually talking about, I think would we say the most frequented guest on our podcast? Is that the right word to use?
Yeah,
Three
third
times. This is the
time.
third time that this gentleman has joined us. Doug Austin, if you haven't guessed yet. And Doug, just to give you a little bit of a bio on Doug, of course, I have to say that my heart is very close to Doug because he's also in Houston, where all the cool people are, Angie, just in case you're
Ugh.
wondering. Uh, but Doug is an established eDiscovery thought leader with over 30 years of experience providing eDiscovery best practices, legal technology, consulting, and technical project management services to numerous commercial and government clients. I can say personally that I talk about Doug all day long as we are consulting clients where I work. Doug has published a daily blog since 2010 and has written numerous articles and white papers. He has received the J.D. Supra Reader's Choice Award as the top eDiscovery author for 2017 and 18, and a J.D. Supra Reader's Choice Award as top cybersecurity author for 2019. Doug has presented at numerous conferences and events, including Legal Tech, New York, ILTACON, Relativity Fest, University of Florida eDiscovery Conference, Masters Conference, and many local and regional conferences. Doug has also presented numerous CLEs or accredited webcasts. I could tell you that Doug has been around ACEDs, you've done Women in eDiscovery, I'm sure. I know that you've done Extero's Exchange. I can't think of anything else that's on here, but there's pretty much nothing this man hasn't done. But welcome, Doug. We're really happy to have you back. Third time's a charm.
Well, yes, I'm excited to be back for the third time. It's always great to be talking e-discovery topics with the two of you, and I'm glad to be talking about the State of the Industry report again for the second time. So looking forward to it.
Well,
Yeah,
I
I'm
can't.
so glad we have that blackmail material on you and we get you to keep coming back.
There you go. That's it. That's what it took.
I look forward to this kind of like when I was a kid and the Sears Toys catalog would come around every year right before Christmas. And you're like, yay, I can do all my Christmas shopping. I kind of feel that way about the State of the Industry report every year. It's like, okay, now I can see what's really going on. And I'm always excited to unpack it with you, Doug.
Well, this is the sixth year we've done it, and every year it's got interesting findings. We try to keep asking a few different questions or tweak the questions a little bit that we're asking. So we did that to kind of see what that would do in terms of responses. I will say that, I'm really excited that for the sixth year in a row, we had a record number of respondents in the survey. 559. And, since this is eDiscovery Checks podcast, that's really something to crow about. So excited about that. Got to work
Ew.
in one before Angie gets started here. Um, but
If you
and we also had 62 thought leaders providing observations, and the report every year is a combination of both survey results and thought leader observations on the same topics, which I think makes it unique and gives you a couple of different ways to look at the trends.
Well, certainly something to cluck about.
Indeed.
uh,
Indeed.
Oh.
It might get my feathers ruffled if, we
oh my gosh. If you guys missed Doug in the past, you'll have to go back. I think last year Angie may have absolutely killed it with the puns. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, but we
think I
found
was
out.
ambushed. Yes.
Yes, we found out that Doug is really into dad jokes and puns. And Angie went all out, so we'll just say. So you won't want to miss those. But you'll be hearing some, I have a feeling, like you already have.
I'm really just trying to rise to the occasion, get a little wind under my wings.
Oh,
There you
goodness.
go. Well, I'll try to limit the jokes, but we'll see. See what we can do.
You guys crack me up.
Ah,
Hey, I'm bringing enters the
So,
mix.
yeah. So, I don't know if some people should take score or, like, start a drinking game, but whatever your pleasure.
we haven't we haven't already chased them all off.
Right.
We'll see.
Well, I always wanna know because 'cause you're the one that puts this together each year, and I'm sure there's things that you're very curious about, wanting to know answers to. I always want to know what surprises you the most. So before we dive in and really start getting deeper into the report, I was wondering if there was something overall that was really a shocker to you.
Obviously with everything else, there's a lot of talk about AI. And of course, we have three questions that really deal directly with AI and generative AI. But one of the things that I think is really most surprising and has been surprising for the past 3 years, and I think is now indicative of really something that's going to continue to be just kind of the way it is predictive coding, if anything, is stronger than ever. It had the highest percentage of people this year than ever who said they're using it in all or most of their cases, 34.4%. We've never had, as many as a third saying that they use it for that many, for that much of their cases. And a lot of the thought leaders had said that they are either seeing or using predictive coding and Gen AI in the same workflows. To me, that's an indication that it's really going to continue to be around and be part of the tool arsenal that eDiscovery professionals are using. So I think that's one notable surprise that has really surprised me for the past really 3 years.
That's great.
Oh, and we are going to dive into that. But first, let me give you our flight path for today's episode. We are going to start talking about how AI, despite all the hype, it's not going to replace processes or people, but it will refine and expose the way that we work. Then we're going to turn and talk about why governance might be the real culprit behind some of these lagging adoption trends that we're seeing. And then we're going to talk about the differences between sectors, law firms, corporations, government, vendors, and why the incentives for adoption differ between sectors. And then we're going to close it all up by talking about what's up with defensibility in AI these days. So, that is our flight path for today's episode. Let's go to our first topic, the first egg we're going to crack open today. And that is AI and its relation to our processes. Because Doug, you've been tracking this stuff long enough to really have receipts for the last 6 years. This is the sixth time you've done this report. So let's start with a stat that makes everybody uncomfortable because it's the whole episode in one number. 60.7% of respondents to your survey say that Gen AI is already transformative this year or will be. But then only south of 20% say that they're using it in all or most cases. So what do you think that gap is exposing? Is it process, risk appetite, incentives, something else?
Well, I think, when it comes to generative AI, like the average chicken, it hasn't taken flight yet. But honestly, I really feel like part of that 60.7% is that 23.3% said that they feel like it's already transformative, which is the first time we added that option. That's the third year we've asked this question. This first time we asked, do you think it's already transformative? And almost a quarter of respondents did, but only 17.7 said they use it in all or most of their cases. So maybe there's a little hype in that first number. And I also think there's still a little bit of tire kicking, if you will. They're using it, they're testing it. Even though I asked the question in the use cases question, I want percentage of you using it in cases, actual cases, not demos or testing. All the numbers went up, but I don't think they're using it. It's not yet a standard part of their processes. And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing. And it's taking a little more time than I think many of us thought that it would get to. In fact, a year and a half ago at ILTACon 2024, I predicted that more than 50% of respondents would say they use Gen AI in all or most of their cases by this survey, and I was way off. That's an indication that it's just not moving as quickly in terms of widespread use yet. The reasons for that could vary. There could be still concern about quality. There still could be pricing concerns and the inability to demonstrate ROI. But I do think that there are still some things that are not enabling it to move as fast as we thought it would.
Yeah, and that's an interesting distinction between last year's question, the way it was phrased, and this year's, is that this year you specified that folks should say that they're using AI in all or most cases only if they're actually using it and not as like a demo or beta
Right.
project. Yeah.
Yeah. And because last year, the use cases question, because last year there were 7 different use cases that were used by more than 30% of respondents. Yet there was an even lower percentage using it all or most of their cases. So I thought, well, they're defining use as any kind of use regardless. So I tried to clarify the use cases question, and despite that, all the use cases went up. We had seven greater than 40% this year. It may be a case where people are just beginning to use it, but not using it a lot in a lot of cases yet. So we'll see, and that'll be one of the things we'll have to look at again next year. Is will we start to see, to me, I feel like it's going to be a matter of time before the percentage of cases question rises. And we're going to continue to ask that question every year to really be able to track that trend over the years.
That's a really exciting trend.
It is
Yes,
indeed.
we caught the pun.
Yes. I mean, and you have to admit that the use cases number versus the percentage of cases is a bit scrambled, but, we'll kind of go with it and see what we can figure out next year and continue to try to interpret the numbers the way they are.
I'm so happy right now. These puns.
This is one of those times I wish that we actually did record the video, because every time that somebody drops one, we're all like a bunch of nerds, like, "Hee, I see what you did there."
I know. I know. All right. Well, sorry, listeners. We don't have a video for you, but just know that we're getting a lot of joy out of being nerdy right now.
Indeed.
All right, let's migrate back to the script. Yes. Okay. So when people say transformative, like in this question, what do you think that means in eDiscovery terms? Like, what's the smallest change that people could make to their daily life that would count as a transformative adoption and not just a little dabble pecking around?
Very nice. Um, I really feel like transformative is it becomes a standard part of your e-discovery processes. And I do think there are a few use cases where you really kind of have to say there's really no downside. I mean, I know that people are still kind of say, well, with review, you have to kind of make sure you can demonstrate it's defensible and what have you in terms of review classification and automating that. But when you look at something like case strategy and ECA, that's something that really you can apply the technology and get some useful information and kind of decide what you want to do with it. But there's really no downside as I see it. And that's probably one of the reasons that I was one of the biggest movers upward this year. I think it rose more than 12% to over 52% from last year being about 40%. So it is, I think, getting to a point where people are realizing all the other ways we can use the technology. And really, many of them are ways that don't necessarily have a downside. It's just another way to get a better understanding of your data set and work with it and figure out things and kind of take it and run with it.
Yeah, and let's pause a sec on those numbers that you highlighted. That's actually where I was going to go next. So let's go to that, Coop. There's an interesting spread in your report about how people are using AI in their workflows. And it's like kind of even-ish between doc review, summarization, and ECA/slash case strategy, all kind of in the 50s and 60s in your report, meaning that the majority of people are using AI for those three use cases. So, I mean, what do you think comes next after those three? What do you think is going to be the next one to sort of catch up with the herd, the flock?
The thought, yeah, I was going to say, don't mix metaphors here.
I
I'm
know.
on e-discovery chicks, not e-discovery cattle.
Yeah, so who's
The
joining the flock next?
That's right. I think there's a couple that just seem to make sense. Certainly using for, assisting with translation is a logical use. And then also one that, I mean, any e-discovery professional who has to deal with images and knows how troublesome it can be to figure out what's on the images. And this technology can do a great job of identifying what's in an image. And I did an experiment a couple of years ago where I just took a picture of my kitchen counter, and it basically listed off everything it saw right down to the Nutella jar. That's the kind of thing that I think really could be. It's an under kind of a discussed use case. PII and privilege identification is strong. Translation strong. Depot prep is on the rise as well. So, I mean, I think we're only beginning to scratch the surface, but I think, those are a couple that I would say really, I would expect to continue to be on the rise.
I'm curious if there's anything AI related in terms of either your predictions that have or have not come to fruition or things that you see in the future as trending. Is there anything that you saw as extremely notable that we haven't called out that you'd like to mention?
With the AI questions, I think, of course, one of the things that we have is that we have five different sectors we break down the results by. So we break them down by providers, law firms, corporate, in house, government, and consultants. On these questions, the numbers were pretty consistent across the board. I think law firms probably had the highest percentage of case usage, but and providers, and partly because they're selling this, many of them are selling the technology, had the highest percentage on the use cases. I think one of the things that will be interesting to see is just, will we hit a plateau at a certain point? Because the numbers have been rising steadily. Will at a certain point people kind of say, well, we're holding and we're trying to kind of sort things out? That'll be kind of the next question. I think so far we've asked two of those questions for 2 years, and the numbers have gone up. The percentage of cases, they didn't go up much, but they did go up some. So that'll be the question. Will we hit a plateau? And really, the thought leader responses kind of get into a little bit what might be holding people back, which generally we hear are things like pricing, concern about hallucinations and quality still, things like that. So I think it's still a matter of recognizing it's a technology, but it's a technology that still has to exist inside of a process with humans at the controls, making sure to validate the results. That's always going to be the case.
So, kind of moving on into a another topic here. I know that I hear all the time from our clients who are either using AI or not that they're trying to overcome in-house some fears of just winging it or losing control. I'm trying so hard to be cool with my puns and I am not as good as these two. But then I
Yeah.
get really proud of myself and I forget what I'm saying. But anyway, so in-house, people are afraid of losing control and in letting the AI take over, letting the robot drive, which really brings us to the real gatekeeper, which is governance. And so when we're talking about governance, sometimes there is a bottleneck there. And I'm curious from your perspective, what do you feel like is actually stuck? Is it the security review, the data handling processes, risk ownership, procurement, or I just don't want to be the first one to test it out. I don't want to be the first one that wings it. There you go.
I don't want to let the fox in the hen house.
There you go.
There we go. Yes. Well, yeah, some of these concepts don't go over easy, but
Oh,
um,
no.
the but I really think when it comes to governance bottleneck, um, it's probably a little bit of all of them. I mean, I think, uh, you know, as the AI gets all the publicity, data should be right there with it in terms of what you're dealing with, and there's so many governance issues related to it: security, data handling, risk, all that sort of stuff tie into it. And governance, really, data governance is a big part of it. As it's to me, it's like one and one A in terms of really what we should be talking about, because the data and the governance issues and challenges are as big a thing to be dealt with by organizations as getting their arms around the technology. So I kind of feel like that's one of the things that it's really kind of hitting in all areas. And I'm not sure if I could pick one and say this is really the big problem. But I definitely think it's something that doesn't get enough discussion because we're so focused on talking about AI, and it is
Mhm.
just as much a front and center of an issue to discuss and address as AI is.
I think it's easy for teens to get terrified when they start thinking about using AI. So a good idea a lot of times is to put up some guardrails. What do those look like in the real world? What gets allowed, what's banned, and what gets tested before it touches live matters?
Um, first of all, I think we created a monster, Angie. Second,
I'm
um,
so glad.
I
Can't let you
um,
guys have all the fun without me. I had FOMO.
there we go. No, so I'm about to release a paper, and I did a webinar last year on validation. And to me, one of the things I think guardrails has to be verifying the results. People act like, for the first time, we're having to validate results, or we're going to have to do as much as we did with TAR and what have you. And honestly, you should be validating results no matter what method you use. Nobody ever seems to want to do it with keyword search manual review, but you should validate results there because it can go just as much off the rails, fly out of the coop as any of them can. So, I think that's one of the things that people really have to have is a kind of a process in place where they're checking the results. And with Gen AI, we're introducing things such as prompt iteration and validation and going through that process. You do that on the front side with a few documents because it's expensive to go through a lot of documents until you get your prompt kind of squared away, and then you apply it to the larger set. So we've kind of added a new workflow into the mix. I kind of feel as though those are the types of things that we have to continue to talk about. People want the technology to always be like super easy and just like push a button and go, but that's not the way it works in the real world. It's a managed process with human in the loop, which has become a popular phrase to say, and it's going to continue to be.
So when I was looking over the report, something I found extra strange was that government entities are often portrayed as cautious. And I know this from dealing with a lot of government sectors with forensics software in particular. But your report has these entities actually highest on the already transformative at 27.3%. So explain this. Like, how does that happen?
I gobbled that stat down.
I kind of feel like that when we have that question and we say already transformative, that's a question where you say, how do you see the industry versus what are you doing personally? So I kind of feel like maybe some of the government entity respondents are like, people are probably doing this a lot more than we think they are. When, as in fact, when you get to the question of how much are they using it in percentage of their cases, it's pretty low. So I don't
Hmm.
think it's necessarily a case where government's like, gung ho jumping in using Gen AI a lot. But I do think they feel like, like a lot of people do. I think anytime you show them stats that shows maybe it's not moving as fast as we think, they're surprised by it. But I do think that that's kind of one of the things about that question. And I think that's why I like to ask the question that way, is to kind of get a sense of hype versus reality by asking it that way. And so, if anything, I think they're probably a little more hyped about it than what they've actually experienced.
Yeah, well, and I think too that leads me to the next topic we wanted to cover, which is, even if you've got your governance under control, you're starting to see adoption, there's still a second veto, money. And especially in the context of law firms. So, there's a really spicy sector split when it comes to commoditization of AI where law firms sort of anchor it at around 42%, corporations 35, providers 31, and government at only 18.2%. So what is that all about? Why do you think law firms are most convinced, well, law firms and corporations and providers are most convinced that price pressure is coming?
Yeah, honestly, and when with regard to that question, because this is a question that first 2 years of the report, we asked a business of e-discovery question. Then we drop it for 3 years to ask about e-discovery use cases. We brought it back this year, but with different choices. And the overall top choice was the prediction that AI it'll be pricing pressure and price commoditization. And you've highlighted an interesting split there. And to some degree, I'm kind of wondering how many of them are predicting it versus hoping that it will get there. Because certainly when you look at law firms and corporations, they are two of the biggest consumers of the technology. So if anything, they might be the ones who are saying, we're hoping it's going to come down. And I think law firms probably have the most to kind of say, hey, this is what we need to really embrace it more, because they have to consider, their billing models adjusting. And it's hard for them to adjust their billing models if the AI is so darn expensive. So I think they're looking for, that to be more standardized and more commoditized so that they can get their arms around what it's actually going to cost them to offer the AI services and understand how it will impact their own revenue models.
And let's pause on that because boy, is that a heck of a fried egg sandwich. There's some friction around billing, right? Because lawyers don't really, the whole billable hour model, it is not premised on lawyers learning how to bill for less time. So do you think that friction in how law firms make their money is slowing adoption?
Oh, I think that's absolutely a factor, because I do think, and one of the things, and I can't remember off the top of my head where I saw it, but I think there was some survey where I think corporate in-house people felt like their outside counsel firms were using AI, but not necessarily passing along the savings or even, really trying to make a big deal of it. Are they using the technology? Absolutely. How is that impacting their billable hours? Hard to say yet, but I'm sure it's eventually, for certain tasks, got to impact it. So then it really, seems as though you've got to eventually head to some sort of value added kind of, service way of providing the service. And everybody always says that, as opposed to two things you can count on, death and taxes, you add the billable hours, the third thing. But I think this is one that really is going to be, eventually, the technology is just too hard to ignore, and these smart law firms will figure out new revenue streams and new way of billing for their services that still provide value and really focus on the value provided, not just a matter of running up a certain number of hours.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because I don't know how they're going to start defining value in that case. And so I wonder if we'll see maybe more AFAs, more like hybrid AFA slash billable hour arrangements where certain tasks are, a set amount of money because we understand that they're going to be, AI will take, a certain amount of the labor under wing and then the lawyers will have to do the rest. But I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think that's a logical kind of flow to it. I mean, today, the billable hour still rules the roost, but it's going to evolve into a combination of things, and I think it's going to be an evolution. It's going to be AFA arrangements. It's going to be, other ways of doing it, and it's going to be a gradual process, I think. And I think the law firms that understand that and start looking at how they're going to move their billing models to provide other ways of doing it. They're going to have clients that are going to be demanding that accountability. So I think they're going to have to start providing it, at the very least, a combination of billing approaches at pretty soon here. Not a case where it's going to be a few years down the road. They should already be doing that.
So why do you think we haven't, reached that tipping point yet? Is the market pressure just not hot enough?
I think we're not at the fever pitch, and of course, we all know about the Gartner hype cycle, and of course, we're with the generative AI is at that point where it's starting down the what is it, the trough of disillusionment, because people always have more expectation of technology at first than it can deliver, and of course, now I think they're starting to come to grips of what it can do and how it's got to be used properly and so forth. So I think as that matures and we get past that and people are really kind of using it as in so many ways and saying, okay, this has got to be something you should be employing, and we shouldn't be paying for a bunch of billable hours when there's this technology that can do it, as well, for a lot less, labor effort. So let's talk about how to do it differently. I think it's just a matter of time. I don't know how much time, but I don't think it's a 5 or 10 year process. I think it's within the next handful of years.
All right. So I have one last stop that I'd like to come by. Wait, I have one last stop before we come to a close on this impeccable conversation. That would be the courtroom and the meet and confer, because eventually someone asks, cool tool, but prove it. One of our favorite lines was when you said, predictive coding should write Gen AI a thank you card. The report says that 34.4% use predictive coding in all or most cases, which is still more than Gen AI's 17.7%. Why is TAR benefiting from the Gen AI hype?
It can be as simple as what Judge Peck said, is that you give lawyers new technology and they'll say, well, we'll use the older technology because it's not state of the art. I don't know that it's quite that, but I do think that people are beginning to realize that the predictive coding approaches make sense to use in combination with the technology. To me, I think that's really kind of raised everybody's awareness of the benefits of technology being applied to things like review. And TAR was just a concept that a lot of lawyers couldn't really grasp onto. It was complex. It was a process that they couldn't get their arms around. Now, of course, Gen AI, everybody uses ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. They all feel like they understand the technology better. They understand the capabilities better. And I think they're saying, okay, now we can get our arms around the fact that technology can be applied to streamline review. So, I mean, people are flocking to predictive coding like they've never have before, and I don't think that's going to wane. I think it's going to continue to be a case where people are going to use it right along with Gen AI, right along with things like clustering, right along with things like keyword search. It's just
Mhm.
going to be a group of tools that people will apply the technology to.
I also agree with you. And looking at the sector gap in your report, the split is, what do I want to say, is
It's
cuckoo
split like a
crazy.
yolk in a bad bouillabaisse.
Like, the split is wild.
You're
Um,
welcome.
Consultants at 43.1% using TAR, and all or most. Government was at 10.7%, and more than half using it, and very few or none. What explains this gap? Budget, mission, staffing, tool access, lack of eggs?
I feel like when it comes to government in particular, one of the challenges has been the move to the cloud has been one that the other sectors could move to quickly, but the cloud providers have to be FedRAMP approved before most government agent or state ramp approved in many cases for state governments. So I think the move to the cloud has been slower for them, and that's where a lot of the technologies are. So I think that's one challenge. And I do think that, I mean, let's face it, government does move slower, in these regards. Consultants are among the quickest to jump on these things because they want to be able to provide that expertise to demonstrate to their clients, hey, we're on top of this. We know how it works. We know what goes on with it. So I
We are
think that's one of
flighty
the things.
people.
They're not as flighty. The government people are feeling a little henpecked, and they're just kind of a little hesitant in that regard. But yeah, I absolutely, I'm not surprised by while the numbers a pretty wide gap. I'm not surprised that government is last. I'm not surprised that consultants are first. And I definitely think that budget and speed of how they typically jump into these things are all factors.
When we talk about the courtroom, I immediately jump to validation. And everybody says that defensibility in the courtroom, but they can mean different things. When we say validation for Gen AI, what does that look like in real life? Are you talking about sampling, benchmarks, audit logs, human QC, precision recall thinking? Like what are you thinking there?
Yeah, what's
My
nested in that definition?
There we go. Yes, I'm running out of puns to throw out here. I'm looking at my list here, and I think I've used them all.
Oh,
But
you came prepared with a list. I love
I
it.
did. I knew I'd had to, have to go toe to toe, or should I say, beak to beak. Honestly, this is one of the things that I'm trying to emphasize is that validation is the same or should be the same regardless what review method you use. If it, there should be a level of validation with keyword search manual review. There should be a that and is historically with predictive coding par, and this should be Gen AI. I mean, I think that does mean things like, doing a determination of precision recall, do some level of human QC to the extent, and be smart about it. Which is for search terms we've done in the past. You get a little ways into it, you can tell right off the bat it's gone askew. Stop and then say, okay, let's figure it out. Let's fix it. Let's make adjustments. Then start the testing all over again. But to me, validation is validation, regardless what method you use. And I don't see that Gen AI has to be treated any differently from any other method of review.
So, the hot topic of the day is prompting for so many different reasons. When are we going to have to agree on what we're prompting and how we're prompting? And is it discoverable or is it not? And how do we save it? And how do we get it? You said the consensus is prompts will be treated like protected work product, mental impressions, like review instructions. But where do you think the line is between strategy prompts and binary classification prompts that might get fought over?
And I think when we're talking about prompts, there are different kind of prompts. There was an excellent session at University of Florida conference last week where they did a kind of a mock um, hearing and judges ruling on prompts, and there were prompts being used. The case involved. It was a fictitious case involving somebody who was basically fired or let go, or laid off, what have you, and there were prompts being used by the supervisors that factored in that the plaintiffs contended factored into their decision to let the person go, and they didn't want to produce those prompts. And the judge, in the fictitious mock-up, said, "No, these prompts are evidence. They're part of they're responsive. They should be produced." Versus work product, where I'm saying it's being used to determine the method of review. I think that then starts to get into more mental impressions of how reviews being conducted. But I do think there might be some question to that depending on how they're going about with the prompts. But my feeling is that if you are, when you when you manage a review that's a typical manual review, you'll have a review manual and it's instructions to the reviewers to say, here's what you consider responsive, here's what you don't, here's where you ask questions. You have an iterative process as you go, you see some documents and you say, well, what do we do with these? You get the reviewers together, you make determinations, you adjust the instructions, and you move on. Prompting is the same way. You go through iterations in prompting, and to me, those are like review instructions. And so that's something that really reflects mental impressions, which, if you're using it to determine classifications of documents, I think would be something that would be considered work product. We haven't had that case yet that where it's been ruled, but I expect this. I think this will be the year we'll have it.
Yeah, I'm so curious to see what the courts do this year. And I feel like there is, to me, it feels like there's a divide between the types of prompts where you're asking your AI to make a binary relevant or responsive, not responsive, or relevant, not relevant, however you term it, call versus a RAG style tool where you're asking it, okay, in my corpus of documents, is there evidence of X? And then probing that way. And I could see a bit of a split there, given that, we have our industry sort of has a history of negotiating on search terms. And so maybe prompts become the new search term. But like, I don't think my thoughts are fully formed on that yet because I see the potential for attorney work product in there for sure.
Sure. Yeah, to me, the reason I think it's going to be different with prompts is that search terms are a culling tool and not a review tool, whereas prompts are a review tool, or at least how they're being used is kind of they're the instructions to say, based on these instructions, determine how to classify these documents as responsive or non-responsive or what have you. And to me, I think that's different. And I think that what you're going to have is plaintiffs trying to get to that, defendants really try, or producing parties trying to resist that. And I think it's going to come down to providing metrics and information to show that the approach was defensible, not so much getting to the, oh, you have to do it this way. And then, just like with any other case, it'll be up to the requesting party to say, well, you've left this out, you've left that out. We're calling into question your processes. That's what I think it really comes down to, and I think will be the case with this. I think it will be. I'll be very surprised if courts say, "Oh, you've got to produce these prompts," when they do reflect mental impressions of the attorneys in many cases.
Mhm.
Yeah, I could also see it being a thing where, if your metrics don't prove the defensibility of your workflow, you can't validate your workflow through your metrics, then maybe we see like an in-camera review of prompts or something like that.
Perhaps, you could do it based on that. I mean, one of the things about metrics is, I mean, if you're doing what you're supposed to, if you're calculating recall properly and you have a high recall rate, that's a pretty good indication that your approach was thorough in terms of finding responsive evidence. And so I don't know. We'll see. In camera review of prompts, maybe. I don't know if I think it would just kind of depend on. I mean, I guess they are more plain English than some things that judges might be asked to review. So I don't know. That could be a possibility. You could have some in-camera review of prompts to make determinations. Okay, are there mental impressions in the crafting of this prompt or not?
I think it's gonna get even more complicated, though, because depending on how your AI is trained, your prompt is going to come up with different results, and you might prompt one way versus another way just depending on how you've trained that AI. So that could get a little sticky. Doug, I really appreciate you flying by and laying it all on the line with us today. If before you take off, is there anything that you wanted to mention to our listeners? I do want you to let them know how to get your report. So that's one thing. But is there anything else that you'd like to mention and leave with us?
Well, uh, thanks for having me once again, Bree and Angie. This has been great. Always a lot of fun. I don't know what the pun count would be, and definitely it's a good thing we weren't playing the pun drinking game because we would all be slurring our words at this point. But with regards to the state of the industry report, it is available for free. All I ask for is one thing: is to subscribe to eDiscovery today at eDiscoverytoday.com, all one word, no dashes. I'll say that not only is that report free, but every report we produce is free, every report or paper. And we have a pretty aggressive goal to try to produce as many as 12 reports or papers this year. And we're already finishing up another one that basically has to do with validation of review that we're hoping to release either this week or within the next couple of weeks. We're looking to really try to continue to provide useful information to the industry. Obviously, we try to do that with daily blog posts that hit trends, best practices, case law, things like that. So that's really what we're all trying to do is provide educational information to the industry, and we can do that through our reports, and we can do that through our daily content.
All right. Well, yes, listeners, if you'd like to get your beak wet, highly, highly recommend eDiscovery Today. It's an amazing blog. I've been subscribing for years using multiple email addresses. So I actually get it multiple times a day, which is lovely. In any event, Doug, thank you so much for being here with us today. As always, and I'm sure we'll say this again next year, we love breaking down the state of the industry report from you. It is truly such a benchmark report for our industry, and we appreciate you sharing your insights with our listeners. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on eDiscovery Chicks. Join the flock by following us on LinkedIn and Instagram, and check out our website, eDiscoveryChicks.com. If this episode made you want to text your legal ops friend, "We need governance," then share it with your network. Leave us a review or tag us on your socials. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
The views we've expressed today are the eDiscovery Chicks views and don't necessarily represent the views of our employers, partners, or clients. The podcast is available solely for educational purposes to provide general information about eDiscovery principles and not to provide legal advice to any specific situation. It is not a substitute for legal advice from a lawyer you retained or who has agreed to represent you.